Women working at the BBC have slammed the corporation's report into pay inequality after it found no evidence of gender bias despite auditors' finding to 6.8% difference in salaries between male and female stars.Accountancy firm PwC, which produced the report, said the broadcaster's approach to setting pay had been far from perfect and said there were anomalies that needed addressing. However, it blamed this on a lack of clarity and openness and financial constraints in the company over the last decade, rather than gender bias. BBC Women, set up by a group of 170 women who work at the BBC, has already said they have no confidence in the review and that they had been excluded from the processes. Women at the BBC said they had faced veiled threats while trying to broach the subject of equal pay. BBC Women, which includes presenters such as Jane Garvey, Mishal, Husain and Victoria Derbyshire, criticized the on-air review. The on-air review should not be confused with an equal pay audit of all the BBC's presenters, on-air editors and correspondents, they said in a statement. It has been focused on news and news-related areas, therefore excluding some high earners. There's been no transparency on which individuals were included or why. They added, "We hope today's commitment from the Director General to put equality at the heart of what the BBC stands for results in swift and meaningful change for women in all roles and at all levels at the organisation." Woman's Hour presenter Jane Garvey, a leading figure in the BBC Women group, said, "We reject the findings of the report. We were not consulted on its scope of methodology." PwC have produced the report they were asked to produce. She added, "This is never about cutting men's pay. Cutting men's pay is not a solution to the issue of equal pay." The data revealed the biggest pay and median pay, 20%, was in the second highest band of presenters, which includes those working in TV specialist news and radio rolling news. One woman employed by the BBC said the review misses the point entirely. She told the Telegraph, "The biggest earners in entertainment aren't even included." The BBC employs 19,000 people, most of whom are not on air. What about the off-air women, many of them lower down the food chain, and some who earn less than £20,000 who can't speak for themselves? Where is the focus on them? Unless a proper system is put in place, it is never going to change. It's indefensible. The Women's Equality Party tweeted, "Today's report from PwC failed to win the confidence of staff because it was set up by the BBC. For the BBC, it did not consult employees properly, and, by the BBC's own admission, it did not include substantive involvement from the independent Husain woman." The long-running debate about salary inequality at the BBC has dogged the broadcaster since last summer. In response to the report, the BBC said among the 168 individuals appearing on our highest profile output, the range of pay is much too wide, the pay at the top is too high, and, at the very top of the range, there are more men than women. The corporation said this was because they had taken a program-driven approach to managing talent, and some salaries had been set when the news market was stronger. The corporation said it wanted to be the most transparent organization when it comes to pay and will do more to explain the salary of each presenter receiving more than £150,000. It wants to close the gender pay gap by 2020, by which point it aims to have equal numbers of men and women on screen. Unveiling a pay system with transparency at its heart, the broadcaster also announced substantial pay cuts for some men and increases for some female and male presenters. The BBC has proposed a £320,000 cap on its news presenters' salaries after an outcry over gender pay inequality, according to BBC News. The broadcaster revealed a 5-point plan designed to fix issues raised by the PwC report, Director General Tony Hall said today. The BBC believes in equality. No one should be paid differently because of their gender. The BBC has a special role representing Britain. That is why we need to be and want to be an exemplar on gender pay and equal pay. The plans we're setting out today go further and are more important steps in modernizing the BBC and making it fairer. The findings relating to gender are likely to frustrate women who have been fighting for equal pay at the broadcaster. More than 120 female staff have lodged formal grievances against the corporation following the controversy that exploded last summer. Most of the women taking action against the BBC are demanding pay rises to put them level with male colleagues. But many also want backdated payments to compensate them for the income and pension contributions they have missed out on in the past. As most of the money comes from the license fee, which is currently £147 a year and pegged to inflation, there are fears money that would normally go towards making programs will have to be diverted. The long-running debate about gender pay at the BBC began last summer after the corporation published its salaries for on-air staff earning more than £150,000. MPs last night published damning evidence from BBC Women, a coalition of 170 female staff including Victoria Derbyshire, Mishal Husain and Kirsty Wark, and the National Union of Journalists. The evidence released yesterday included 14 cases of inequality of pay, detailing a string of examples of female staff being underpaid. The women were not named out of concern for their BBC careers. But one presenter prepared to go on the record was former BBC Scotland health correspondent Eleanor Bradford, who claimed she was paid around £10,000 less than some of her male colleagues in similar roles, prompting her to leave the BBC after nearly 15 years. Another female presenter said the gender pay disparity left her feeling as though bosses had naked pictures of you in their office. The MPs, from the Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee, said it appeared the BBC had a deeper cultural problem with gender pay than previously thought. The BBC has proposed a £320,000 cap on its news presenters' salaries after the outcry. The upper limit will also apply to editors and correspondents, although the plans have not been fully agreed or signed off, and those affected by the cap have been given the opportunity to respond, BBC News reported. It has not been clarified if on-air staff will be able to earn more from other work at the BBC, such as entertainment programs on radio and television. Speaking today, newly appointed Director of News and Current Affairs Fran Unsworth appeared to defend the salaries of top earners from entertainment and sports, such as Graham Norton, Gary Lineker and Chris Evans. Evans is paid around £2.2 million and Lineker around £1.7 million. Unsworth told BBC News, "Well, I think it's the point that these really are operating in different markets. Entertainment is a much more competitive market than news is and has become increasingly competitive. And if we want to stay relevant, if we want to be popular, which we do, we take the license fee from everybody, so we have a duty to make sure everybody gets something out of it, then we are going to have to employ the best people." BBC Director General Tony Hall and Carrie Gracie, who quit as the BBC's China editor over pay discrimination this month, will be questioned by the committee of MPs tomorrow. Last week, a number of the BBC's leading male presenters agreed to have their pay cut in the wake of the row. The broadcasters said Jeremy Vine, Nikki Campbell, John Humphreys, Nick Robinson and Hugh Edwards would take reduced wages. Figures released in 2017 showed Vine was one of the corporation's highest-paid stars, earning £700,000, £749,999. Humphreys, who presents the Radio 4 Today programme with Robinson, earned between £600,000 and £650,000, and BBC News presenter Edwards earned £550,000, £599,999. Vine hosts a weekday show on Radio 2, as well as featuring in BBC News' election coverage, while Humphreys also presents Mastermind on BBC 2. Veteran broadcaster Humphreys agreed to cut his salary to around £250,000 to £300,000, saying the BBC is now in a different position financially to its past. The figures released last year showed he earned between £200,000 and £249,999, while Gracie earned £135,000 a year. Radio 2's Chris Evans topped the 2017 list on more than £2 million, while the highest-paid woman was Claudia Winkleman on between £450,000 and £499,999. A BBC spokesperson said, "We look forward to an informed debate at the Select Committee based on all the facts. The BBC is committed to equal pay, and we don't accept the assertion we have not been complying with the Equality Act, nor do we offer inferior contracts based on someone's gender or race. We want to help women progress in their career and have set out ambitious targets to close the gender pay gap filled by women. We've also set out action to achieve them. We have already set out how we plan to deliver real pay transparency for our staff, and today we'll publish proposals to significantly change how we manage on-air pay, so we have a clear, transparent and fair system for the future." The spokesperson added that the corporation would not getting into debates at the moment on pay band levels. The BBC doesn't do equal pay, what the former Scotland health correspondent was told when she queried her salary last night. MPs published a string of examples of pay inequality at the BBC. They included paid about £15,000 less than male health journalists, despite being told she was a model correspondent. Miss Bradford, pictured, complained and got a £5,000 increase, but left as it did not close the gap. When she queried her salary, she was told, "The BBC doesn't do equal pay." She was happy to be named, since she no longer works for the corporation. TV news presenter, "I sat next to a man with an identical job, paid tens of thousands more, spent 3 years sitting next to a man who was paid tens of thousands more for the same job. Was offered an immediate pay rise just before the BBC published its rich list last summer." National radio presenter with more than 20 years' experience, the line manager told me the BBC doesn't do equal pay, invited on trial for a flagship arts programme. Two men with no broadcasting experience were paid 25% extra for the same trial. She got the job, but our male co-host was on 50% more. Her boss told her the BBC doesn't do equal pay, and she was being aggressive for raising the issue. BBC reporter, "I don't resent my male colleague. But we need parity of pay. Earns half the rate her male counterpart does for equivalent programs, with access to fewer resources." Offered 25% pay rise when she complained after months of wrangling. National broadcaster, I have been offered a 65% pay rise, whilst also being told there was no issue of equal pay. Offered 65% rise after the pay row erupted, bringing her in line with the lowest paid presenter on her program. BBC said it was satisfied there was no issue of equal pay in her case. News program presenter, I am paid hundreds of thousands less than some of my colleagues. Spent 6 months negotiating a salary of £53,600 for a 3-day week. Then found she was on £45,000 less than her immediate male predecessor. Sports broadcaster, what you are worth is solely at the whim of management, who essentially in sport are always man. Receives £500 a shift to front a flagship sports radio program, while her male co-presenter gets £1,200. Was offered £650 per shift after complaining. Says she is at the top of her game with 30 years' experience. On-air editor, the BBC has refused to accept there is an equal pay issue, but offered me an on-the-spot 10% increase. The BBC Rich List revealed a male editor on the same program was paid between 50 and 100% more than she is. BBC said there was no equal pay issue, but offered an on-the-spot 10% increase, which she rejected. Regional presenter, I raised the equal pay issue many times over the years, but nothing was done. Is paid half the amount per shift that her male co-presenter receives, despite doing the same job for years. Sport editor, 4 men doing the same job have confirmed their salary is higher by up to £10,000, paid up to £10,000 less than her male counterparts. Requested equal pay last year, but it is still under review. Radio 4 reporter, I am considering further action as they refuse to backdate my pay. Paid £7,000 less than her male colleague for doing the same job. When she raised a formal grievance, she was offered a £4,500 rise with no back pay. National radio presenter, I have worked with my male co-host 6 years, and for all that time been paid 1/3 the rate he is paid, gets just 1/3 of the salary of her male co-host, despite doing the same job for the past 6 years. Was told in 2016 that there was no issue, but was given an increase in 2017. Presenter on national radio, as the sole breadwinner I eventually had no choice but to leave. Told in 2013 her local radio job was at risk and she could only stay on for half her previous salary, which was also half the rate paid to her male co-host. She could not afford to accept the deal, so left. She then got a better paid job at the BBC, but still earns less than half the amount of her male co-host. Regional news presenter, I can't see any justification for the pay gap, which remains paid 1/3 less than her male co-host on a TV news program, despite working the same hours and regularly being chosen over her colleague for particularly demanding segments. Had equal pay request refused until last year, when she was got a 5% rise.